Do remember that any builds I show are mostly here to give you a basic idea about using the augment. If you really want to go in depth, you should make your own builds based upon your own preferences. And there are timestamps in the description. Seeking Shuriken. This augment allows you to do a 100% armor strike with just 144% strength. Suffice to say, as a helmet ability, it is a great option for Steel Path Disruption and boss fights. Gaze. While Atlas himself is one of the most mediocre frames in the game, this augment is simply brilliant. Use Helmet to put this on your Nekros and use something like this build. Now you can solo farm with a much higher efficiency. Sonic Fracture. This augment is a great way to armor strip, and the number one reason for that is the fact that this hits in a cone and can hit many enemies in front of it. With a base range of 15 and the debuff being refreshable, the only downside is the fact that this is not a helmet ability, which is a shame. Resonance. While Banshee's sonar is a great damage buff, it has a big downside of requiring precision aiming for a different spot on every other target. But with this, you can reactivate the ability so many times that hitting the weak spot becomes pretty easy. But still, none of this fixes her survivability issues, but Pillage might. Savage Silence. While this is practically a useless augment on Banshee, since this is a helmet ability, you can use it anywhere, which means Ash can use it to vastly increase his 4th ability's damage. Reactive Storm. A must-have mod in any Baruuk build that wants to deal big boy damage. And oh boy if it doesn't make that 4th ability an absolute monster. Fireball Frenzy. An extra 100% elemental damage for the whole team, which scales with ability strength, is no laughing matter. It is a pretty significant buff, but unfortunately this is not a helmet ability. Healing Flame. This is a great augment that can easily heal you all the way. However, this is not as good as a healing tool as Arcane's or Panzerwolfaphyla, but not everyone has those, so until you get them, this is a good augment if you need the heals. Exothermic. An energy augment is a great thing to have when having maximum survivability is tied to a constant energy drain. If you put both efficiency and this augment on your build, you can spam your abilities all day. Calm and Frenzy. This is an amazing augment, and being a helmet ability, it has stellar use cases, some of which are night mode version of the ability with any invisibility frame for stealth farms, and day mode version with max range Nekros for faster loot farms or damage Octavia for faster kills. Peaceful Provocation. This augment is mostly useful in the day mode to get some incredible strength buffs, because the buff itself scales up strength too. If you mod for 250% strength, you can give the team up to 80% extra strength, which will make your own strength 330%. Truly, it's a sight to behold. However, the night mode buff, while amazing on paper, is incredibly hard to build and is a straight up inferior Sevagoth helmet. Chromatic Blade. If you want to use Excalibur at high levels for dealing damage, this is a must-have mod, and make sure to put your emissive color on the correct element to get the most out of this. Furious Javelin. This augment gives a buff, and if the buff was easy to maintain, I would say use it instead of Chromatic Blade, but it isn't. So Chromatic Blade it is. But if you somehow manage to fit both of these in your build, and have high strength, and enough range to hit all the javelins, and decent duration, then I guess you can use it, but in reality, it just doesn't fit in a high-end build. Biting Frost. This is a really good mod to use at high-level missions with weapons that can crit. And since it doesn't scale off anything, it doesn't make you max out any stats, which is amazing. If you combine this with Frost 3 and 4, you can do Steel Path defense missions solo like they're nothing. Freeze Force. It's a really good augment, both because it is easy to use and its ridiculously long duration. A fine addition to any build that uses a good amount of strength. Ice Wave Impedance. A 75% lingering slow effect in one direction is a pretty nice thing to have, especially when it has the added benefit of cold procs which further slow down enemies. And that base 20 meter range is no joke, though maps with different elevations are a little bit problematic, as this may or may not work the way you want it to. Spectrosiphon. While this augment is quite pointless on Gara herself because the mirrors will be destroyed instantly, it can be quite useful on some other frames via Helmet. For example, Mag can make great use of this by using it in combination with her 2 to both kill enemies and get a lot of energy out of it. Bloodforge. Put Gloom on your Garuda and equip this build. Then use a Kuvazar with a build similar to this, and now you have a semi-automatic Kuvazar that reloads instantly. Suffice to say, this is the strongest Steel Path nuke build I've made, and the embodiment of cancer. Blending Talons. This is my go-to augment for Garuda, since the way her 4 works is pretty slow, and this fixes it and has the added benefit of extra combo for Talons, which is a pretty nice thing to have. Thermal Transfer. One mod that gives you both cold and heat elemental damage with an incredible duration. This is basically the combination of Frost and Ember's elemental buff, but with a higher duration and a bigger total buff if you use both cold and heat simultaneously. This is a brilliant helmet ability, definitely give it a try. Mock Crash. This is basically a mini vortex. Not much to say honestly, it is simply a nice thing to have, though the usability is a bit questionable on certain maps, but in most maps it works just fine. Lasting Covenant. This is a niche kind of an augment which works under very specific circumstances, and you'll also need at least a Heldern Helmet and ideally an Arcane Aegis to make it work. So you'll use a build like this and cast your 4 and then you keep getting headshots, and you'll be capable of holding the buff indefinitely. Pilfering Swarm. While this is no longer part of the top farming squad, it still has some use cases, so it's not dead just yet. Concentrated Arrow. So here's what you do. Put this build on your Warframe and this on your Artemis bow. Activate your 4th ability and put your 1st ability on Sleep Arrow. Use Alt Fire key to instantly cast the Sleep Arrow and then easily headshot an enemy for massive slashing AoE damage. Negation Swarm. While this is not the best way to get status immunity, if you want to use Helmet for something else like Gloom, then this becomes a solid option, but I still think Inaros is only for new players who don't know how to play the game. Fight me. Accumulating Whipclaw. If you want to deal damage with your 1st ability, having this mod is a must-have. And don't forget that your 1st ability heavily scales up your melee mods, including Blood Rush, so you need that combo. Pilfering Strangledome. Ever since this mod got introduced, Khora has been a staple in any farming squad. So if you want that extra loot, definitely put this on your build. And this synergizes with her 1st ability's augment, so try to fit that in the build too. Swift Bite. I'm not much of a Lavos user, but with this augment you can combo his 1 and 3 for infinite ability spam. Did I mention that unlike his 3rd ability, this cooldown reduction also affects the 1st ability itself? Which means that base, if you hit 4 enemies, your 1st ability's cooldown will be halved. And with 175% efficiency, it becomes only 1 second. Just look at how much spam I can do. Rift Haven. Are you sick and tired of your defense operator dying? Do you not want to play any defense or support roles? Then Rift Haven is for you. Simply use Helmet to put Banish on your Warframe and then slap this augment on it. And the results speak for themselves. Rift Torrent. Are you not dealing enough damage while playing Limbo? Well then this mod is here to fix that. The more enemies you have under your third ability's effects, the more damage you'll deal. But yeah, this is mostly effective against Grineer, but you can make it work on Corrupted and Corpus too, but not Infested. They will insta-kill you with their toxin damage. Counterpulse. Every mag player on the planet uses this augment. This is the augment that makes her fun to use, since you can CC almost everything. And when I say everything, that includes stuff like most bosses, sentients, and even Eximus units, which don't get CC'd by almost any other CC ability. Explosive Legerdemain. This is the augment that made Mirage relevant. With this augment, you can nuke low to mid level with such ease that even Saryn becomes jealous. Definitely give it a try with a high range build like this one. Total Eclipse. This mod allows you to support your team with either a massive damage reduction or a massive damage buff depending on whether they are standing in light or shadow. While not the most reliable buff, it certainly helps out. Prism Guard. While not the most useful of mods, there's something really fun about walking through a mid-level mission while all the enemies just die as soon as they see you. Despoil. This mod combined with Equilibrium must be the most common combo in the entirety of the game, as it is incredibly effective. Shield of Shadows. If you want a tank Nekros, combining this with Hildren's Pillage is a great idea. This way you can also use Despoil for energy and loot. Safeguard. This is a good augment for early to mid game where enemies won't instantly destroy the halo. And because you can cast it on your companion, it can be useful even when solo. Abundant Mutation. This augment is quite useful when you want to boost your first ability's damage to insane amounts. But it does come at the slight risk of dying before the 30-second cooldown is over. But if you're good at the game, you won't have to worry about that because it's Nidus. You're not gonna die that easily. Teeming Virulence. This augment is the other side of the coin. Instead of increasing your stacks to 300, you'll be maxing your stacks and then focusing on your primary weapon with this incredible augment which gives you insane amounts of critical chance. Molecular Fission. If you're sick and tired of dying as Nova, slap this on and mod for as much duration as possible. Something like this build. Now as you kill enemies, you'll regain your damage reduction, which is incredibly handy. If you're really crazy, then add Hildren's Pillage instead of her 3 and you'll have far more survivability than you'll ever need. Assimilate. This mod is ridiculous. Liches, Sisters of Parvos, Acolytes, literally any enemy that is not a nullifier, piece of cake. You're literally invincible and you can use your weapons. You can also use your operator to move around if need be. Combine this with CC from her 3, complete shield and armor strip from her 2, and you have a stellar Warframe. Put Hildren's Pillage on her 1, and you become invincible. Smite Infusion. Radiation damage bonus. It is not only one of the best elemental bonuses to get, but also a great distraction CC if you're running high level, which can be key to survival even if you already have a lot of damage reduction. Phoenix Renewal. You never know the power of this augment until it saves your life in an arbitration. This is a great augment that you should definitely try if you like playing Oberon, which not many people do these days. Repair Dispensary. If you're a MOA or a Sentinel guy, this mod is for you. You can put Dispensary on any Warframe via Helmet and then put this augment on the Exilis slot so it barely changes your build. This way you can use any Sentinel or pet you want. You can also use this with spare parts for some farms. Thrall Pact. This is a really nice mod if you want some extra damage, and since this doesn't count as a damage buff ability, you can further amplify the damage by adding Roar to his kit for some big boy damage. Ironclad Charge. This augment is really useful if you want a massive amount of iron skin. You could combine this with something like larva via helmet, or you could use a shield mod and parasitic armor. In both cases you will have a ridiculous amount of iron skin. Regenerative Molt. If you're a Saryn player that doesn't have adequate survivability or any external forms of healing, like Operator Arcanes or pets like Panzerwelpaphyla, using this augment becomes an option. While the heal value is not incredible, because of the fact that Saryn's second ability is a distraction CC, it'll work just fine to get out of a sticky situation. Venom Dose. This augment is for Saryn that wants to play support and buff the team's damage with a corrosive elemental buff. While I've never seen such a Saryn, you could become the first ever Saryn that gives buffs and puts corrosive and viral procs on enemies and doesn't make the game boring as hell. Razorwing Blitz. This is the augment that changes Titania from top 10 most useless frames in the game to top 10 most useful frames in the game, simply due to how important movement speed is. If you want to hear more about this, I have a video on that, link in the cards. Enraged. Valkyr's fourth ability has not been relevant for a long time, but because this augment gives an incredible amount of burst damage and also completely removes that insane energy drain and its ridiculous ramp up mechanic, I can recommend it, but only if you're a Valkyr fan. Hysterical Assault. This augment is actually surprisingly useful. Because Valkyr's Exalted doesn't have the best range, you can use this to get to your target extremely quickly. This mod is definitely the best mod you can put on Valkyr's Exile slot. Eternal War. This is a good augment if you're a big fan of melee kills, as you can practically have this ability active on yourself and your allies as long as you get kills. The downside being the fact that you no longer cast Warcry every now and then to slow enemies down. Repelling Bastille. This is the augment I use on my Vauban when I go Interception. This completely removes any need for ability strength, making Vauban good enough to solo Steel Path interceptions of any faction. Assuming you know how to survive with a Vauban, that is. Shock Trooper. The standard elemental buff, one of the better buffs in the game due to that solid base duration which puts Roar and Eclipse to shame. Capacitance. You can't talk about Volt and not about this augment. This augment, if used properly, changes Volt's survivability from terrible to unholy. This is due to the fact that as long as you're constantly getting shields, which is the entire duration of the ability as long as you have enemies in range, you're completely immune to any form of damage except Toxin, which is Infested exclusive. Fused Reservoir. A quality of life Exilus augment that I would recommend to most Wisp players. It is a lot easier to give buffs to a moving team with this compared to the usual 1x1. But if your team is stationary, then you probably don't need this. Celestial Stomp. This is quite a simple augment, but the range is super good and the energy cost is only 25, which means you can spam the hell out of this thing. And to top it all off, this augment affects Demolist. Pair that with Wukong being at the top 2 recommended frames for disruption, and you have yourself an incredibly easy and fast way to do disruptions even if you don't have stuff like Magus Tether. Primal Rage. If you're a big fan of Wukong's stick but feel like it doesn't do enough damage, then this augment is for you. It gives you a maximum of 150% critical chance, which is respectable given you only need 10 kills to max it out. The Relentless Lost. This augment is incredible. Whoever came up with this needs to start reworking every useless augment in the game right away. And someone give that lovely person a raise too. With this augment, you can get 100% armor and shield strip with 95% ability strength, which allows you to make a build like this one, which has a gaze with a radius of 30 meters. Simply amazing. Vampiric Grasp. This augment is basically the fix to Xaku's survivability issues. For example, if you just give up Prime Flow in the previously shown build, which is totally doable by the way, you can make a Xaku that has 100% armor strip, can kill big boy enemies, and is constantly healing, which is honestly unbelievably effective at taking care of enemies at any level. Air Burst Rounds. If you like using secondary weapons, this augment is for you. If you hit enough enemies to hit the cap damage bonus, you can infinitely refresh it by hitting even a single enemy, which gives this augment good usability and doesn't lock your build, which is brilliant. Jetstream. Does your favorite weapon have good performance but terrible projectile speed? Do you want to run as fast as Volt even when playing Zephyr? Say no more. With this augment you can make Latum nearly a hit scan weapon, which honestly is more than enough reason for me to recommend this augment. If there are any other augments that you think are worth mentioning, do tell me in the comment section, and if you learned something, make sure to like the video. There's also a subscribe button if you're into that kind of thing. And with that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!